Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. Viewers, the 22nd of September 2025 is a white swan moment. It's a day that we will remember as we look back sometime in the near future as a day when Bharat came to a level of indirect taxes it never could have fathomed before. Just two slabs of 5% and 18%, and most of the staples off the entire indirect taxes list altogether. From a time where, including state levies, taxes, octroi, etc., where we would as consumers pay anywhere between 28 to 35% as taxes, these slabs were brought down to four main slabs of 5, 12, 18 and 28%. In 2017-2018, it was a big risk that was taken. The GST conversations had come around since the turn of the century in early 2000s itself, and it was something that Bharat needed to do. But who would take that leap? Yes, many opposers or many naysayers would say that Gujarat under the now Prime Minister and then Chief Minister Nirmala Modi was one of the states that opposed GST in that form, but it's being implemented today. But those forms, the arguments were there in terms of what would be the revenue share of the states, how would the revenue be given. There were questions on the clauses and the implementation itself. Then, when the implementation happened, the opposition called it Gabbar Singh tax, saying that you've got multiple slabs, you're supposed to be one nation, one tax, where is the single slab at all? But 7 years down the line, it's been streamlined further to two slabs, two important slabs, and then there is the 40% slab. But more importantly, it's been done at a time when Bharat has been able to embrace these slabs, and somewhere there is an infrastructure at the back end that's been created to manage things. States still bicker about the revenue share and whether or not it is coming through, and the centre says you've got a debt that you owe to the state because of your overdraft. So those arguments aside, but for the Aam Aadmi, from a political point, from an economic point, from a standard of living point of view, in the last 11 or 12 years, this is perhaps the biggest bonanza that's come for the Aam Aadmi, the middle class per se. There is something in it for the poor, there was something in it for the rich. Every time the question asked of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman was, what's in it for the middle class? When are you giving us some relief? And in this third term, the first 1.5 years, there has been the benefit of the indirect taxes, the corporate taxes coming down, and of course the direct taxes, increasing the income tax slab till up to 12 lakhs, no tax. More money has been put in the hands of the middle class. Now, will this trigger an unprecedented rise in consumption? Will the benefit of this GST be passed on to the consumer, given that it's been only 15 days since announcement to implementation? Will these initial hurdles, these creases be ironed out sooner than later? And will the festive momentum be capitalized on? These are all questions, and we'll discuss that in detail. S.C. Gargji, former Finance and Economic Affairs Secretary, is with us. Tuhin Sinha, National Spokesperson of the BJP, with us. Saket Mishra, Investment Banker, with us. And Sanjay Jha, Author and Political Analyst. My namaste and Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you for your time. Mr. Garg, we had this conversation earlier in the broadcast this morning where the common people on ground were saying, I don't see the benefits passed on because the manufacturer has not yet relabeled. Those who have stocked from earlier, they don't know what to do with this price. The consumer is saying, I don't know kiska daam bada hai, kiska daam ghata hai, kahan zyada mila hai. Is it too early, too soon? Has the government given too little time for everybody to organize? Or do you believe, agar nahi kiya hota, to karenge bhi nahi? It's important to disrupt a bit.
See, any major change of this type, when you bring about massive change in the rate structure across the items, touching more than 35 to 40% of the items which are subject to taxes, will create transitory problems. There is no escape from this. The system is too large. We have about 1.4 crore registered GST vendors. There are many times more unregistered traders and all who are exempt otherwise. And there are lakhs of manufacturers and others. And of course, then you have over 100 crore consumers. So, in this kind of system, whenever you change, there would be stocks in the pipeline, there would be many items which would be at old rate, new rates. GST system itself is quite messy. There are output taxes, there are input taxes, you give some credit, you take input credit taxes. So the whole system is so complex that whenever you do this kind of change, there would be intermediate, there would be transitory disruptions. I don't think any government can avoid that in any manner. Having said that,
जी
the two objectives which the government wanted to achieve through this latest round of GST reform is one is the reform element and the other one is the tax giveaway element. Reform element is better understood in the sense that we had 5 rates effectively, though if you count each and individual variations, there were about 45 rates. But 99% of the goods were covered by five rates, 4 rates plus the GST cess. Now that has been brought down to 3. And so we have now 5%, 18%, and 40%. This is a reform. This is a reduction. This is a reform in rates. This also brings about consequential improvements in terms of the classification disputes going down. So if you put all the items related to popcorns and the chocolates, etc., into one tax slabs, then those disputes go away across the food chain and all. And likewise, the input, the problems of the tax structure being sort of type. So those are also in a way reduced. So that is there. But the tax giveaway, which is the main item, which is I think everyone, including you in the media and the government trying to sort of sell, that to my mind is not that big, which we are assuming that's not going to make that big change. Take it that what Prime Minister said that yesterday 1.5 lakh crore out of 2.5 lakh crores accounting for 1 lakh crores of the income tax, 1.5 to 2 lakh crores out of the consumption basket of the country, which is 203 lakh crores. It's about 1.5%. You don't touch that big way. There are some items, automobiles, televisions, etc., which are touched in a major way.
Correct.
But it's not touching the entire basket. Even you take otherwise, we collect about 22 lakh crores to 3 lakh crores of GST. Even if you give away 10% of that, that's not a very major difference. And the state of incomes and the jobs in the economy is such at that time that the demand push, which is getting distracted, which is getting into problem, cannot be compensated by this one. So I have very sort of limited visibility in the sense that this will be a game changer.
So you don't believe it will be a game changer. There are others who believe that it will take perhaps about 15-20 days for it to reflect, and perhaps maybe some say only by the start of the next quarter will it actually, the benefits of all of this actually start manifesting. So Inzana, how do you want to respond to this? That the government perhaps has been a little hasty, and we can't be so optimistic about what seems to be, on the face of it, quite a radical change, up to about 600 to 800 rupees per week. Many are saying could be the impact on certain households. At least 25 to 50 rupees every day could be the impact. In certain cases, when you're going to buy a car today, a car is almost lakh and a half cheaper, even at the entry level. So that also fuels aspirations for those who said, "Bhai, hamare liye bike hi theek hai." From 2 to 4 wheeler they can. But there are others who are saying कि उतना कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला है.
Well, namaste, Anand, namaste everybody. A very happy Navratri to everybody. And it's a very special Navratri because 4 days ago the leader of opposition had exhorted people, Gen Z, to come on the streets, to protest. Gen Z will be on streets today in the markets, in the malls, making massive purchases, improving their livelihood, improving their lives and, possibly buying their first cars. So that will be the impact of this change. Many of these changes, while yes, we have been accused of being hasty, point is we don't believe in, taking too much time to implement things. So the transitory issues would be there. But the results will be very obvious because this being the start of the festive season, if the GST cuts along with the tax, the income tax leeway up to 12 lakhs, I mean, that is expected to put 2.5 lakh crore into the hands of the people. And being an aspirational society, it's going to find its way back into the economy across sectors. At least in the last 2 weeks, we, the Karyakartas, have been meeting people from across sectors. And I can tell you, whether it is senior citizens, whether it is women, housewives, or whether it is people invested in drones or renewable energy or ex-servicemen, all of whom find this to be an excellent move, time to brilliance. So the drone technology would only help in further expansion of the defense sector. The solar panels GST cut from 12% to 5% would give a boost to the renewable energy sector. Obviously, the household items have gone down significantly. I think, you need to give it a couple of months, but Q3 is when the real impact of this will be visible. I would not be surprised if the Q3 GDP growth figure goes up to 10%. That's my estimate.
But the Congress has called it an eyewash. Sanjay Jha, why? You've posted saying that this is not going to yield anything. Why do you say so?
Yeah, Anand, I'm very glad that we are having a very mature debate here on a matter which is purported to impact the country at large. I will tend to agree with Mr. Garg's what I would call as a very nuanced, it's not a conservative view, it's a very pragmatic view on the GST. Let me add to what Mr. Garg said earlier. Firstly, on the mass consumption items, it is usually inelastic. In economics, we call it as inelastic goods. So, for example, when the government increases the price of petrol, it doesn't mean that we stop using our scooters and cars. We just kind of still use it. So, end of day, if you, for example, are talking about the reduction in certain essential items across the board, it doesn't mean that people are going to increase consumption, which will be more than the cut in prices. So, end of day, what will be the impact on investment? What is the real game behind GST? It is to say that I'm foregoing an element of tax revenue on the assumption that it will lead to a boost in demand, which in turn will lead to greater investment and therefore manufacturing and jobs.
Right.
The truth is that in mass consumption items, that's really unlikely to happen. And there are two reasons behind that. Number one, you also find that in India, and I'm taking Mr. Garg's argument forward, that you have, one is the inelasticity, that is the big problem. The second is going to be that if you look at the job market in India, please don't exclude that, Anand.
Right.
That when you have no jobs, you basically saying that there's no income. If there's no income, there is no expenditure. So the whole GST benefit really gets neutralized at the very core. Now, forget the joblessness as it exists today. What I tweeted was AI is going to make it worse. I know a lot of my friends have been, in the IT sector. The TCS laying off 12,000 people made a headline. But across the board, either there are wage freezes or the wage increase is nominal, not even keeping pace with the inflation. And in many places, they're de-hiring. So you really have a job crisis, and I'm not even getting into the tariffs, H-1B visas, and the new Hire Act, which is coming in. So India will not be able to create that additional jobs, which would have been perhaps the bigger spenders here. And you got another problem.
Right.
And we can't look away from these details, Anand, that today when you recognize that as a country, 800 million people depend on free food grain, right? There will be certain people who will buy a car or a scooter in the lower category where there is a definite GST benefit. But 800 people live on free food grains. You are really expecting them to be riding up the consumption curve? Not at all. So you have some serious, I go back to what we said at the time of the budget, I think on your program. There are structural issues, and structural is not an abstract term. The problem in India at the moment is that we have not been able to give a boost to private investment. There is still a lot of excess capacity.
Right.
And what this is going to do, I tell you, and this is the last point I wish to make. Maybe Mr. Gad can come in later. I don't want to argue with Tuhin because he's going to give the BJP rhetoric. My bigger point is, go back to 2019. Nirmala Sitharaman announced a tax break for the corporate sector, which was to the tune of 1,50,000 crores a year, which means by now you have spent over 9 lakh crores in just foregoing the tax revenue. I'm not even compounding that. What was the promise she made? It will lead to boost in investment and jobs. It hasn't happened. And that was a direct benefit, direct tax transfer, literally to the corporate sector. This is an indirect tax break, which is assuming that an increase in demand will lead to an investment. I'm not bullish at all.
Right.
India needs to still bring about bigger reforms.
Right. Saket Mishra, would you want to weigh in on this? Because the numbers point towards an increase in consumption. There is a number point towards an aspirational Bharat, which is wanting to have more disposable income and perhaps use it for more. We've checked on ground. They don't see it manifest so soon. Maybe it will take a week or 10 days for everybody to organize and understand this. But the average sweet wala is saying that my ghee is sasta. So I'm not going to increase prices this festive season. The mithai wala, the average car buyer is now thinking of a higher model. The bike buyer perhaps moving up to a bigger model because there is a huge saving and trickle down effect. Health insurance, there is a big one. So would you want to say that give it some time, give it 30 days, 40 days for it to start manifesting? Or do you believe that this is not going to exponentially push the consumption curve this festive season?
Thank you, Anand. I think my first argument with Sanjay ji is that he's having coffee alone, and that's not fair. But I think what these taxes represent, and I'll take 30 seconds.
Yeah, but the 40% on caffeinated goods can be a deterrent on wanting to buy all of us a cup. Yeah.
So I think there are two philosophical underpinnings to.
Yeah, but Sanjay ji can afford it.
GST
Sorry,
cut.
please carry on. Sorry. Thank you.
One is that there is a belief that there is a right for everyone to have aspirations to a good life. So whether it's a mother dairy ice cream or whether it's buying bread, which has gone down. I mean, it may be small for us. But a 6 or 7 rupee cut in the price of a loaf of bread means a lot to a lot of people. It may mean an extra ice cream for a little kid who's quite poor.
Right.
Second is that it represents a degree of confidence that the country has or the government has in terms of the fiscal consolidation, because they believe they can afford these cuts, and hopefully there will obviously be an uptick in terms of spending, and therefore they'll be able to make up for it. So I think there are two underpinnings that are quite important. As far as the inelasticity is concerned, and I'm going to stick just to the GST cut. The fact is that if something has inelastic demand, that in any case is not going to be influenced by employment or unemployment, because people will need to eat. Where a GST cut actually makes a difference is that this inelastic portion of our country, and I am on the optimistic side that believes that the country is actually improving in terms of the average person's ability to buy, that inelastic basket is actually getting narrower. Second is that what this GST does is that it allows people who might have been, it's not just about, bread or milk or ice cream, but let's say simple thing like a house. If cement becomes cheaper, if some of the construction materials become cheaper for homes, things that people might have taken an extra year to wait and wanting to get it later, I think some of the demand will get pulled in slightly faster. So there is a whole chain of events that we are creating, hopefully out of this GST cut, that will lead to an improvement in demand. The second side of this also, which again is sometimes perhaps being ignored, is that GST was complicated. I have to file my own GST, and it's a bit of a hellish exercise sometimes because of overlapping categories and all that. As we reduce GST and as we sort of remove the overlapping categories, the cost or the benefit to a person to avoid GST, having those gates at the back from which they send their goods out, etc. That actually is reducing. So they're saying that, look, let's come into the economy and let's pay the tax. And guess what? we are still making the same amount of money we made earlier, and the consumer is happier. So, will this be a magic wand that will suddenly change things? No. Will it impact and improve consumer demand? All logic says yes. Is it something that we should have done today or tomorrow or day after? It doesn't really matter. If it's a good policy decision, it should have been done today. And I think the impact will obviously I suspect it takes at least 45 days for things to start ringing in. And does this mean that we don't need to create employment, or AI is not going to hurt employment? Of course, AI is a point of concern. But that doesn't mean that we don't take other policy steps that make it easier for people to do business in Bharat, that give, let's say, the lower income class a chance to actually have a good life. Because if that happens, if the aspiration increases, there's also a chance of people doing more in terms of setting their own businesses and being ready to actually fight for a job or fight for employment or fight to create a new business in this brave new world. So I think it's a decision that was long overdue, if anything else. And it will be beneficial.
Mr. Garg, your thoughts, sir? Is this perhaps a precursor to opening up of the markets? Because one of the aspects is that you have to create competition to fuel innovation. You have to have other industries setting up businesses here to create jobs. So is this perhaps a precursor to a lot of manufacturers locally, that I'm going to give you a little bit of a tax advantage and to manufacture at a cheaper price because I'm going to open up the market to competition? Should we look at it that way?
So the way I see it, the government was left with very few options. When a government is in a tight policy situation, we must acknowledge this. There are jobs problems, there is income problem, these now tariff-related problems created because of the exports getting affected and things like that. So startups now see the story getting a little bit difficult as we go along. So the government has been, in last 1 year to my mind, in a difficult spot. It's trying to do whatever it can. And that was the reason why the government probably brought the income tax concessions, that 1 lakh crore kind of bonanza, making the tax exempt income to be 1 lakh rupees a month.
Right.
Which would, Anand, by the way, take away, we have only about 3 crore actual taxpayers in the country.
Correct.
Taxpayers, and this measure will take away another one to 1.25 crore. So we'll be reduced in a country of 140 crore with less than 2 crore taxpayers in the country. But the government was sort of desperately looking for doing something. They thought that this might bring the consumption. If the consumption comes, this will create demand. The demand will generate the investment. And that is the cycle which they were hoping for. And it is, I think, that experience we can see in the context of what is going to happen or what is likely to happen in the case of GST as well. Now we are 6 months down the line since those income tax concessions were announced, right?
Right.
And we have data now on the GST, which was given on 1st September, so we have up to August kind of data for 5 months. I think you might have noted that for last 3 months, the GST growth rate is 6.5% on an average. That's not even equal to the nominal GDP growth of the country, which is about 8.5% to 9%. We have always assumed that the GST growth rate would be higher than the nominal GDP growth. And we have a situation, despite such a big concession having been given, that the GST growth, nominal GST growth rate is less than the nominal GDP growth.
Sir,
so will it turn the new concessions, the GST, will it create that kind of demand? That's where I have, you see, it's very easy to imagine that there are certain items, the automobiles, the televisions, the air conditioners, the consumer durables, which would see some definite increase in demand.
Right.
people will go for higher price, better quality things. But the larger consumption story, I have honestly very serious doubts.
No, here is that's where it is. Tween, the larger consumption story is also the basic staples at the kirana stores, at all of these places where huge number of FMCGs are going to be consumed. There are about 55 categories the government is going to monitor. I just want to quickly understand. Is this entire aspect of cash coming back into the system and a lot of these purchases being made by cash so that GST can be avoided? Is that going to manifest? Is that going to be addressed? Is that a concern? Is there too much cash back in the system again?
Well, that is a concern in some states specifically, and that was also being addressed. Now, one question which keeps arising is, like I heard Mr. Garg also say that, the government was in a tight spot. It was a compulsion. More than a compulsion, I would say it was a natural progression. When we inherited the reins of government, tax evasion was so rampant, from 4 crore ITR, from a 4 crore ITR, base. Today we are at 8.009 crore. When GST began in July 2017, we had only 66 lakh GST registered accounts. Today we have 1 crore 51 lakhs. Obviously you have seen the investment. You have seen the investment that has gone into infrastructure, whether that is 75 new airports, 1,000 plus metro lines.
Right.
It was a natural progression for the government to think that this is the right time to ease that taxation and put money back into the hands of the people. Now, whether that results in the kind of increased consumption which we are expecting or not is something which time will tell. But we are very confident. In fact, the government is very confident, and I think the real figures will come out at the end of Q3.
So at the end of Q3, and with that, then perhaps allow the government to tee off on, if you spend more, I will give you back more in terms of the budget towards the end of Q4. We'll have to wait and watch. Engaging conversation is just the start. It's just day one. Let's see how things pick up, streamline, perhaps organize by the time we get to day 9, the end of the Navaratras, and also kick in towards Dussehra and Deepavali. Thank you very much. Engaging conversation as always. My thank you to everybody. Namaste.